The night I was attacked, we had just taken a midterm. And so I had parked in the parking garage because I thought that walking to the parking garage in the middle of the night, my class got over with at 10, would be safer than walking across campus in the dark over to off-campus parking. And so we left with a group of 3 or 4 of us because it's ingrained in you, or it's ingrained in me, that there's safety in numbers. And so when we reached the parking garage, I was the only one who had parked on the ground floor, so we broke off. They went up. Going to my vehicle, I was approaching it in a manner that I was surveying in and around it, and that was not something that's out of the ordinary for me. I've always done it since I was a kid, and it's something that I learned during my martial arts training. And so I was approaching, there was a man hunched over, hiding on the other side of a pickup, and as I passed him, he grabbed me and forced me to the ground, placed a pistol to my temple, clicked off the safety, and told me not to say anything. And then he brutally raped me. The police department was less than 100 feet. And it was on the same floor where they park their cruisers. It's closed. They closed their offices at 6 p.m. There was no safety officers present on campus at that time. I did have my concealed permit at the time. I didn't have my gun with me because as the state law stands now, or as the legislation stands now, it is illegal to carry on campus. And so as a law-abiding citizen, I left my firearm at home because I wasn't even allowed to have it locked in my vehicle with me.
Welcome back. It's been nearly now a month since California college student Breonna Dennison disappeared in Reno. Investigators say they think she was kidnapped from the home of a friend. They found what appears to be blood on a pillow she had slept on, and they say DNA at the scene matches samples from an earlier unsolved rape case.
The atmosphere on campus, once they became aware of this assault, changed drastically. It was also linked, however, to a young woman disappearing not far from the university campus, from being taken out of a home. And it was also linked to another woman who was kidnapped shortly and assaulted and then taken back to her apartment. So it was just all kind of exploded at once, where they connected everything, and so there was a lot of hypervigilance around some of the fraternities, organized, like safe escort home, so that they would meet young women as they were coming out of their classes, and they would escort them to their cars. The campus handed out whistles. I didn't feel safe. I didn't know if this guy was watching me still. I didn't know there was so much uncertainty, and so my dad found that there was a little clause in the law that the president could grant permission to individuals at his discretion. So we drafted a letter asking for permission and why we wanted permission. And so the president, required me to go through this whole process of interviews and whatnot with the chief of police from the university before he granted it. When I received the letter granting me permission from the president of the university, it stated that there were 6 contingencies attached to that. The first one was that as soon as if I ever disclosed to anybody that I was granted such permission, it would be null and void. Initially, my reaction is that I was just thankful that I was given the ability to be able to protect myself. I was a little offended because it's not, up until this point, the fact that I have a concealed permit is not something that I broadcast anyhow. And I was a bit perplexed that they were granting me my Second Amendment right at the expense of my first.
State your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
I'm Amanda Collins, Collins, and Chairman and Assembly members, I just want to thank you first for listening to how pertinent it is for SB 231 to be passed. The decision to testify publicly in that setting, it was because it was a difficult decision. I was foregoing my anonymity that I had worked very hard to maintain during the trial when this man was being prosecuted. And so I had to come to peace knowing that people were going to know who I was and who, you know, that piece of me was not something that I was going to be able to necessarily always make the decision or choice to disclose to people if, you know, circumstances or situation was appropriate. But it was a decision I made to prevent anybody else from being in the situation that I found myself in. And it was a decision that I made because this is bigger than just me, and it needs women and men being unable to defend themselves needs to stop. The unanswered question of my life is and will remain to be, what would have been different if I'd been carrying my gun that night? It is a question that keeps me up at night as I replay the worst 10 minutes of my life over and over again. I think it's imperative that the legislators see that this isn't all theory and it's not theoretical, but it's reality. And unfortunately, in situations like this and with legislation like this, it doesn't stop being theoretical until you know somebody or until it happens to you. It's brought healing to me to have a cause to fight for instead of just dwelling on what happened, but to turn something, you know, the worst experience of my life, to do something positive with it. I've heard this argument a lot that college students are too immature to be able to exercise their right to carry concealed on campus. But we're not talking about 18, 19-year-olds. You have to be 21 to get your permit. And these students are able to carry on without incident everywhere else in their lives. So why is it that they lose all reason as soon as they cross that arbitrary line? And if you're talking about colleges, when they want to recruit students, they talk about how they are the brightest, the best, the future, when they're talking about wanting them to come to their university. But then when it's granting their Second Amendment right to carry on campus, we're suddenly irresponsible, irrational, immature, unable to make sound decision. This is a real issue involving real people who, when they're not given the right to defend themselves or the ability to participate in their self-protection, they get hurt. And it didn't just happen to me. I'm not the only one who was raped. There were 2 other women who got raped, but as far as me, it affected my whole family. It affected all my friends who were aware and now are grieving with the fact that this happened to me. And so they have the opportunity to honestly save lives, because had I been carrying that night, there's no doubt in my mind that at some point I would have been able to stop my attack. And consequently, I would have prevented 2 rapes and a young life would have been saved.